Right, Andy, we're here to talk about you and Baron's War 2nd Edition. For anybody that doesn't know Andy, Andy has a huge plethora of games under his belt, some very successful ones, from A Test of Honor to Mortal Gods, Gangs of Rome, and Baron's War. Oh, and Warhost. Can't forget Warhost.
Okay, yeah.
So you've joined War Games Atlantic as our creative director. I must say I'm delighted to have you join the company. How do you feel about it?
Oh, I'm very excited. I think War Games Atlantic are doing some very great things. And they're going from strength to strength, and being able to come in and be involved in the direction that we take the company going forwards, especially when it comes to games and further kits that we make, etc., is very exciting.
I'm super excited. Super excited. In fact, the best place for us to start is the Baron's War, because, as people may or may not know, we've got Baron's War 2nd Edition coming soon.
Absolutely.
So what inspired you to create the Baron's War in the first place, and how has the game evolved over time into this 2nd edition?
The initial inspiration really came from the miniatures. I really like that period of history, which came from a game many years ago called Cry Havoc.
Okay.
Which is set in that period, and which was one of the first games I played when I was a 14-year-old boy.
Right.
And just really this idea of knights and peasants all hacking at each other is a lot of fun, and that kind of stayed with me. So then, move forwards in time to my time at Footsore. One of the things I wanted to do was create a range of miniatures for the Baron's War, and really driven by one of the main characters from the period, is a guy called William Marshall.
Of course, yeah.
Who I'm a bit of a fanboy of.
Yeah.
And being good friends with Paul Hicks, we had a conversation around how we were going to do it, and he agreed that he would sculpt the figures. We would take them to Kickstarter originally because we had no money to actually fund it, and between us we created the first range of Baron's War figures.
Yeah.
And that's where it all started, really. It was just a real passion to do just figures.
Yes, yeah.
When we released those figures at Kickstarter, it went really well, but one of the major feedbacks that we got from the backers was they really wanted some rules to play.
What do we do with
figures? Yeah. And they just petitioned me, really, to write some rules.
Yeah.
And initially, to be honest, it really wasn't, on my radar at all. But then thinking about it being a period that I really like, it just really got the creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
And I just initially planned to write a set of rules that we would give away, to the people who backed.
Yeah.
And that's how it started, really.
It's going to be quite scary then. It's a period that you're really passionate about. You've just made this range of fantastic miniatures to go out and to support that kind of love for that period. There must be a real weight of responsibility then on getting the rules right, getting the game right.
Yeah, I try. Oh, that's a really good question. I try not to get too hung up on it.
Okay.
So I think it's quite easy to get paralysed by that.
Sure.
Feel weight that you can, have, and then, you just get that paralysis where you wouldn't start.
Yeah.
So the starting point that I like to have is I try to write the type of game that I would like to play.
Yeah.
And then I know that if we create a game that I want to play, then I've created the game I want to play. And then if anybody else wants to play that game as well, then that's a bonus. So that's always the point of view of where I come from.
Yeah. And I think we all have similar interests, don't we? A war game is a war game, and as long as it's engaging and exciting, people will enjoy it.
Absolutely.
So we've had Baron's War 1st edition. Mm-hmm. It's been out for 5 years now.
5 years this week, funny enough.
Fantastic. Yeah. Cool. 2nd edition. How different is 2nd edition from 1st edition?
Well, the book's bigger for a start, which was one of the things, again, we were petitioned to do.
Right.
So the initial, if you've got a copy of the 1st edition of Baron's War, it's an A5 book. It's quite thick because I got quite carried away. And it's very unwieldy to use. So what we've agreed to do is make the book bigger. It's a bigger book.
Yeah.
I believe it's better laid out.
Cool.
And it's a lot easier to navigate.
Yeah.
So that's the initial look at it. And also the layout's a lot cleaner. So the book is a lot more user-friendly.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing really is the layout has been addressed. When we first did the Barons War 5 years ago, it was COVID. So I started writing it in isolation, really, in COVID. So normally we would have a lot of feedback, a lot of play testing, all of that kind of thing that would go along with it. This time we were very hamstrung by the bubble that we could have.
Yeah.
So there wasn't many people involved at that point. So what's happened for version 2 is because the community has grown around the book and the rules, etc., we've been able to have more people involved.
Yeah.
And obviously, the more eyes on something, the more feedback you have.
Sure.
I believe you get a better product.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose it's 5 years worth of playtesting then, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying, the rules of first edition weren't ready, but the beauty of going into a second edition is you can take all of that feedback and stuff and roll it into the new edition.
I agree, and that's been the driver for it, really. We haven't changed anything massively in the rules. So if you had version 1 and version 2 together and you looked at the way the game plays, the play is very similar. What we've done is tidy a lot of it up. And exactly what you've just said there, after 5 years, we have an FAQ and a errata sheet, which is about 14 pages long.
Yeah.
And some of that is just poor proofreading, but a lot of that is where we've had 5 years worth of play testing that's fed back into the game, which we've been able to improve the rules, in my opinion.
Excellent. Now, that's good news. I think a lot of the existing players will want to know that it is still staying true to its first edition. It's an incredibly popular game system with a huge community out there. And it's really exciting to be delivering on that second edition. So how do you approach balancing a game historically whilst also making it fun and engaging from a gameplay perspective?
Yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah.
I think it is. And I think... and this is my opinion, of course, you choose one or the other. Yeah. I think if you're going to play an historical game, a lot of historical games are historical simulations.
Yes.
So if that's what you want to play, then that's great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not negative about that. And you reenact the battle. Yeah. And you play those games. So that's one way of playing historical war games. For me, I like to pick periods in history. We talked about Test of Honor. I love Samurai. Yeah. We talk about Mortal Gods. I love Hoplites. This whole idea of gang warfare in Rome, like HBO Rome. Yes, to me, that's the history triggers and gets me excited. Yeah. And it's the same with the Barons War. If we talk about William Marshall, he was a tournament champion and he was a larger than life character. Yeah. And that's the bit that I like about history. Yeah. And that's the bit that I want to bring to the games. So that's where I come at it from. Yeah. I'm very, very respectful about history. And part of where we've evolved with the Barons War is we have a chap called Benedict who is on the team now. And he's a background in medieval history. He keeps me true. Yeah. So I don't do anything crazy, but I like to challenge. I can see him grimacing at me sometimes when I go, oh no, they've all got the, for a good example is like knights with heater shields. Yeah. About the period we're doing now, all the heater shields would be the smaller style. Right, okay. So when you talk to Benedict about it, the only option that knights should have is the small heater shield. And we're like, no, it's a war game. You want to give people choice. Yes. So you have large, medium and small shields. And I can see his toes curling at that point. So historically wise, that's probably not accurate. But what we then try to balance it with is when we're making the miniatures, we try to get them as accurate as possible, and the setting to look as accurately as possible. Yeah. But ultimately, it's a game. Yes. Yeah. So the way the game plays and the game being fun, for me, is the primary objective of what we're doing.
Which I think shows through in the first edition for sure. I think that's one of its greatest strengths. Is I think for me, it's the equivalent of creating a good piece of cinema that represents a historical period.
Yes.
If you just filmed what it was like at the time, it was very miserable and very dull. Whereas you add in that character, that larger than life characters, and that excitement, that cinematic element, that's what makes it more engaging, right?
And that's the type of games I like to play.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the feedback from the community and how that's fed into the development of second edition. How much did the community influence the development, going into second edition?
Well, for me, massively.
Yeah.
I mean, we have quite a large Facebook group. There's nearly 13,000 people in there, and it's very active. I try to be active in there, and I try to answer questions. So a lot of feedback, we read all feedback that goes in there, and everything that's fed into there, and anything that we feel needs addressing, we take that on board. And a lot of the updates, the FAQ and the errata comes from the community. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is over the years, we have a community of event players and tournament players that's building up, and there's some stalwarts of that scene.
Yeah.
And their feedback and their which they feedback in when we meet up or at any time, dropping us emails. We listen to what they have to say, because I try to play as much as I can, but these guys are playing all the time.
Yeah.
And then so there's feedback there, and then what we did about, I think it was before Christmas, we took a group of 10, 11, 12 guys from the community, and we went away for a weekend to a hotel, which we paid for, and we put the game on, and we just ran through the entire rules of version second edition, and we just questioned all the changes that we wanted to make and checked with these guys if they were a positive change for the game. Were we making the change for the sake of the change? And the idea was that the change would stay in from version 1 if the game was improved, and this was fed back by these guys who play, and they're really into the game and put strong stalwarts in the community. So we didn't change anything without running it through with them.
Cool.
So you could say they had ultimate feedback in.
Yeah.
And then when the final manuscript was done, we sent it out to not all of them, because having them all read it would take time, and time is of the essence. But to some of the key guys, they read through, they challenged anything that we'd missed. They'd ask questions around what certain things said, or if it was different to how they understood it over that weekend.
Sure.
So again, that was like the sense check.
Yeah.
So I think using the community has kept us true.
Excellent. Okay, so for the gamers out there, what strategies and tactics do you find are the most effective within the game?
Okay, lots of units. I think you want to be activating, have a lot of options. You can have lots of single hard units, which does work in some situations, but a lot of the time you want lots of options. So that's quite a key, and it's finding the sweet spot for the size of the different groups that you field. So understanding how many levy you should have against how many knights you should have is something you need, I think, is something you need to learn about playing the game. We've all got an opinion, but it also depends on the style you play.
Sure.
So that's quite key. We've changed one of the rules slightly, where we've made commanders, you have an overall retinue commander, and you can have other commanders in there. And normally what the other commanders did was it just gave a group more than one activation.
Okay.
But now we've allowed them to use their orders to have units nearby react to what's going on. So all of a sudden, having those commanders in strategic places, it doesn't leave your groups as exposed. So that's quite a good thing. So now you need to work out how many command groups you should have in your army that works as well. Okay. So that's pretty cool. But ultimately, the Barons War game itself is very narrative driven. So your tactics really need to work and depend on what scenario you're playing.
Right.
Because, you could get absolutely wiped off the face of the board, but as long as you've taken the objectives and you're still holding those objectives at the end, you can still win the game.
Sure.
So, that's pretty key.
Okay, that leads me into my next question then, which is, so out of all the scenarios that are in the book,
Yep.
do you have a particular favourite?
It's quite dynamic how you build your scenarios. So there's a list of 15 scenarios in the book, and then there's a list of 12 ways to set those scenarios up.
Right.
So not so much the scenarios, but more the way that the setup for your forces.
Sure.
So normally, in pretty standard way of playing a war game is you set within 12 inches of the table edge and you have that gap down the middle.
Yes, yeah.
Not in the Baron's War. There is that option, you may roll that, but some of it you could be starting touching.
Right.
You could start with half your force in your opponent's zone and the other half over here. So I think some of the setups make the game quite exciting.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the way that you generate. So part of it is you build your retinue and you create this retinue that you think will be good. And if you want a challenge, you roll your scenario after building your retinue.
Yeah.
So, your retinue may not fix the scenario.
Right. Okay.
So that side of it is quite exciting for me.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Or, you could be quite sporting. You could roll, you and I could be playing a game, Charlie, and we could be playing at the weekend, and on a Tuesday we could roll up what the scenario is.
Yeah.
And I could, here's the map, here's the layout, here's the scenario. So that gives us the rest of the week to get ready to play. But
sure.
It's not as fun.
Agreed. Okay, so how do you envisage? So you've gone through first edition. We're coming out second edition.
Yeah.
Personally, really excited to be delivering that.
Yeah.
Through War Games Atlantic.
Yes.
So brand new starter set, packed full of plastics, new rule book in there. Where do we go from there? How do you envisage the game developing over the next 5 years, and maybe even beyond?
Yeah, I think this is a great place to be. I mean, when we started this 5 years ago, we didn't envisage in 5 years' time we would be working with War Games Atlantic or part of War Games Atlantic as I am now.
Yeah.
Being able to do this box set, I mean, the box set is fantastic, and even if you've already playing Baron's War, it's a great set to get. You got the rules, all the plastics in there. It's a real great starter. And if you haven't, off you go, split it with your mates. 2 500 points forces in there, or a 1,000-point retinue in there. Get playing. So to me, I'm very interested to see what people do with that.
Yeah.
But going forwards, there is a little team. There isn't just me now. So we've got George, who's the keeper, George Asling, who's the keeper of the army lists. Yeah. And he keeps us all true. And then Benedict, who I mentioned earlier, is an academic, and he is a machine for writing. So between us, we have already started to create supplements. They're like source books. So there will be one available in 3 or 4 months' time. Which will be the King John source book. Yeah. And what that will take is it's actually going to take the Baron's War, which is the original setting, even further. Yeah. And then we'd obviously want to do Outremer. We want to do the Anarchy, and there's lots of other periods we'd like to do. We'd like to go east into Poland. Yeah, and look at all the Eastern Crusades. There's so much we could do, and coupling that with plastics from War Games Atlantic, it gives us so many opportunities. Yeah, which is very exciting indeed.
Maybe as we get to see a little plastic William Marshall one day.
Oh, don't tease me.